Hello, welcome to Weathersfield Proctor Library Storytime. I'm Glenna Coleman, Youth Services Librarian, and this is our library Bear. You may notice that he is wearing a hat today. He has told me that he feels that Paddington Bear has been neglected, and so he's worn this hat in honor of Paddington. You can see that there's a little bit of a resemblance there. So because of this special request, I am going to read 3 stories about Paddington Bear today. These 3 stories are all by Michael Bond, and they're all illustrated by R.W. Alley. Now, if you don't know anything about Paddington, I should tell you that Paddington has a habit of getting himself into sticky situations, but he always manages to get himself out as well. This first story is called Paddington's Prize Picture. Paddington's Prize Picture. One morning, Mrs. Brown sent Paddington to the market to buy some oranges. Paddington was well known in the market. The traders always saved their best fruit for him, and he always thanked them for it. When he was done shopping, Paddington visited his friend Mr. Gruber. Mr. Gruber's store was filled with old things, but he always had something new to show Paddington. Mr. Gruber was very busy. He was washing a painting. On one half, Paddington saw a picture of a boat. On the other half, Paddington saw what looked like a hat. "Just you wait," said Mr. Gruber. "There's more to come." "I've never seen a picture like this before," said Paddington. "That's because one picture is hidden under another," Mr. Gruber said. Paddington had a great idea. He hurried home as fast as his legs would carry him. Paddington looked for the picture Mr. Brown had been painting. He wondered if this one had another picture under it, too. Paddington began to clean. The boats and blue sky disappeared, but there was nothing underneath. The beautiful picture was now a stormy sea. Paddington decided to fix it. He found some brushes and an old box of paints. Then Paddington set to work. He started to paint the boats and the lake. He carefully filled in the spots he had cleaned. Paddington stepped back to look at his work. There was no lake. There were no boats. He reached for the paints and began again. At dinner that evening, Paddington was covered in orange spots. "I hope you're not getting sick," said Mrs. Brown. She sent him to bed early, just in case. The next morning, everyone was happy to see that Paddington's spots were gone. Well, where did they all end up? On his sheets. I don't think they'll be so happy later on. "I have news," said Mr. Brown. "I have entered a painting contest. You must all come to the show." "Oh no, I wonder what will happen next." The art show began. The judges looked at all the paintings. Mr. Brown loved painting, but he had never won a prize. "This could be it," he said. The whole family was excited. The judges announced the winner. It was Mr. Brown. But Mr. Brown looked confused. "This is not my painting," said Mr. Brown. "There must be some mistake." Paddington's painting on Mr. Brown's canvas won first prize. The judges showed Mr. Brown his name written on the back. Mr. Brown accepted his prize. "I think I will donate my prize to the Home for Retired Bears in Peru," he said. Now, if you don't know Paddington, you don't know that his Aunt Lucy lives in the Home for Retired Bears and that Paddington came from Peru. Paddington beamed. "My Aunt Lucy will be pleased. She likes happy endings." "Don't we all?" said Mrs. Bird. That was Paddington's prize picture. Ah, that Paddington. He certainly managed to get out of his scrape. Well, here's a second story about Paddington. Paddington Sets Sail. Now, I don't know about you, Bear, but when I think of setting sail, I think of a boat. I don't think of a bucket. This looks interesting. Paddington Sets Sail. One morning, Mr. Brown had a surprise. "We're taking a trip to the beach," he said. Paddington, Jonathan, and Judy cheered. Mrs. Brown and Mrs. Bird were excited too. Mrs. Bird is the Browns' housekeeper. Paddington had never been to the beach. He did not know what to bring, so he packed everything. Soon they were on their way. Paddington poked his head out the window. He sniffed the salty sea air. At the beach, Paddington got a pail, shovel, sunglasses, and a float. He was ready for anything. He certainly looks ready for anything. The tide was low, so they went in the water. Jonathan and Judy splashed and swam. Paddington floated in the waves. My goodness, that looks like fun. At lunch, Mr. Brown had a great idea. He said, "Let's have a sandcastle contest." Paddington, Judy, and Jonathan would each make a sandcastle. The biggest castle would win. My goodness, that does sound like fun. Paddington wanted to win. First, he found a perfect spot. He dug a moat. He carried pails and pails of sand. He made walls and windows. Paddington placed his hat on top of the castle. Finally, he was done. Paddington's big sandcastle was perfect. Paddington sat inside his castle. Sandcastle work was hard, and he was tired. Then he fell asleep. Oh my. Oh no, the tide had come in. It knocked down Paddington's sandcastle. It carried Paddington's pail out to sea, with Paddington in it. Well, he is in a pickle, isn't he? The Browns were worried. It was getting late. They found Paddington's hat, but could not find Paddington. Where had he gone? Then the Browns spotted people gathered near the pier. They ran toward the crowd. It was Paddington. People believed that Paddington had floated all the way across the sea. They took his picture. "Did you float here in this pail?" a girl asked. "Yes, I used my shovel as a paddle," said Paddington. The sun was setting. It was time to go home. "Did you enjoy your trip, Paddington?" asked Judy. "Yes, not many bears go to sea in a bucket," he said. The Browns were so happy to have Paddington back. "Today's trip was a bit shorter than when you came from Darkest Peru," said Mrs. Brown. Paddington did not hear. He was fast asleep. Well, Paddington certainly got himself out of his pickle when he set sail, didn't he? I don't know about that, Bear. All right, our third Paddington story today is Paddington and the Magic Trick. Paddington and the Magic Trick. It was Paddington's first birthday since moving in with the Browns. Everyone was getting ready for the party. Judy hung streamers. Jonathan blew up balloons. Paddington could hardly contain his excitement. Well, birthdays are exciting, aren't they, Bear? Mrs. Bird baked a special cake for the big day. She filled it with marmalade and covered it with icing. Well, Paddington loves marmalade. I'm sure he'll love that cake. Paddington wanted a taste. Mrs. Bird let him lick the spoon. It was the best birthday cake he'd ever tasted. Paddington went to look at his presents. He opened his new magic set. He put on the hat and cape. Paddington had a great idea. He would perform at the party, but first he had to learn a few magic tricks. Ooh, I see him sitting down with a book to learn the tricks. That's always a good idea. Paddington waved the magic wand. Abracadabra, he said. He did not see his marmalade jar drop into the secret drawer. The trick worked. Paddington practiced some more. He couldn't wait to perform for his guests. Soon the guests arrived. Paddington's good friend, Mr. Gruber, led the way. Everyone sang, "Happy Birthday." Then Paddington blew out the candles on his cake. How many candles does he have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? I suppose he must be 5 years old then. It was time for the magic show. Paddington set up his magic box. Jonathan and Judy dimmed the lights. Everyone was excited to see Paddington perform. Paddington put an egg on the magic box. He covered it with a scarf. He said the magic word. He waved his wand. Now, what do you think will happen? Let's stop and make a prediction. Okay. The egg had disappeared. Paddington took a bow. He tucked his paw into the secret drawer to get the egg. Ta-da! It was a jar. Paddington was surprised. How had a jar ended up where the egg was supposed to be? Paddington's guests smiled and waited for the next trick. Well, that is some trick, changing an egg into a jar, isn't it? Next, Paddington would make flowers disappear, but he could not remember all the steps. Uh-oh. Paddington opened a large door in the back of the box. He crawled inside to check the steps in his magic book. While his guests are waiting, I suppose. His guests waited and waited. Was this the trick? Finally, Mr. Gruber knocked on the box. "Are you okay in there, Mr. Brown?" Paddington was stuck. Mr. Brown helped Paddington out of the box. "Maybe you could do another kind of magic trick," Mrs. Brown suggested. Paddington tried a card trick. Mr. Gruber picked a card. Paddington tore it into little pieces. "This part is tricky," said Paddington. He covered the card with his scarf. Paddington waved the wand. "Abracadabra," he said. What do you think will happen? Will that card be whole again? Let's find out. Oh, said Mr. Gruber, the trick worked. He put his hand behind his ear and pulled out a coin. Mr. Gruber handed him the coin. Paddington knew just how he would spend it. He would buy their next morning buns. Well, that's the end of Paddington and the Magic Trick by Michael Bond and illustrated by R.W. Alley. I hope you enjoyed listening to stories about Paddington getting into trouble and getting himself out of trouble. This was Glenna Coleman at the Weathersfield Proctor Library. Story time. Our library bear says goodbye. Can't wait to see you again. And we'll see you at another story time.